Hello, hello, hello. Oh, we got everyone coming in. We've got a couple coasts represented today. I'm usually in Bend, but I'm in Salt Lake right now, and Daniel's out on the East Coast. I'm curious where everyone else is. If you want to toss that in the chat, I've seen a lot of people put their LinkedIn as well. If you guys are trying to network some, feel free to add your LinkedIn in there as well. Montreal, love it. In Toronto, ooh, a lot of Canada. Hey, another Oregon. Love it. We'll give it just another quick second. Zoom's kind of slow to let everyone follow in. But yeah, thank you all so much for attending today. Oh, that's what I had to change as well. We'll do that. Okay, cool. Now Zoom's set up correctly. Let me. There's a rogue microphone in there. Well, we'll fix that later if it becomes a problem. But yeah, thank you all for coming. We've got Daniel here today. He's going to talk about Open Door Climate. He's the Director of Business and Innovation at the Environmental Defense Fund. He's also teaches one of our courses at Terra.do, Climate Innovation in Corporations. And I'm just like super excited to have him here today. You've done a lot in climate. You're so well connected, and you're really good at connecting people to other people, which I'm sure we'll cover. Daniel will talk for about, you said 20 minutes, I think, right? 20, 30 minutes. And then we'll have a live Q&A for the rest of it until we get tired or run out of questions. The chat will usually go in pretty quick. So if you have any questions, use the Q&A feature in Zoom. It's on the bottom bar of your screen. It says Q&A. You can add questions there anytime throughout the chat, so that we can like see it at the end. You can also upvote people's questions. So if you have a similar one, you're like, oh, I really want him to see that. You can upload that there. If you have any questions or comments on, or anything you want to add on a comment or on a question, you can comment on them as well. So many people. All right. Daniel, do you want to sort of take it away from here, or do you need me to do?
No, that's great. Thanks so
I
much,
can talk
Eno.
about you all day long. You're really impressive.
I'm good. I'm good.
That's good.
Thanks, Ian. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to be able to speak with everyone, especially about this topic. But also, I see like a lot of familiar names that I've connected with on LinkedIn before. Really excited to meet some new folks here. Today, I'm going to tell you a little bit about kind of my journey through the climate space, and then talk about one of the biggest barriers that a lot of people face that are trying to get in the space, and that is the lack of a network. So we're gonna just kind of jump in real quick. Let me make sure this is the right one. Cool. Does everyone just see a white screen right now? Yes. Okay. All right. I'm going to start from the beginning. So I went to school because I wanted to help solve climate change. At the time, this was around 2005, 2006, there was this mounting oil crisis. Oil was hitting $130 a barrel. And I said, you know what? I'd like to work on something that matters. I want to find the next fuel. I wanted to work in alternative fuels. I thought it was a huge need. I just read so much about it. I was learning so much about it. The reality was I had no idea what a job meant, right? Like I had no idea that what skills I would need, what a day-to-day job working on alternative fuels would be, what companies were even doing it. It was really challenging. So I was actually at a friend's house one day, and their older brother went through the same program that I was in at school. And I was talking to him for a bit, and he said that he was working at this energy solutions company doing energy audits. And I had never heard of energy audits. I had maybe a 10-minute chat with him. He told me about what it is. I asked him whether he liked doing it at all, what he did kind of in a normal day. And I really started to like the idea of how like tangible this energy audit thing was. And he just gave me some names of here's some companies that are doing this work if you want to go check them out. So I researched some. I applied for a few internships and I was able to get one and I loved it. I thought energy efficiency just like clicked and I was like, okay, maybe it's not alternative fuels because there's just not, it's not there for me yet. I want to do this instead. So fast forward a few years, I'm about to graduate. I go over and visit my parents one day and I run into their neighbor outside and catching up with them. She asked if I was still studying this energy stuff. And she tells me that she's actually randomly consulting for this new energy startup, and they're doing something called real-time energy monitoring. So they're putting sensors in buildings and being if see energy usage in every 15 minutes. And I thought that was so cool. I just like really latched on to that idea. And she said if I'd like, she'll intro me to someone that works there. I said yes. I was their first energy hire, which is funny because they had 30 people in an energy startup. But I was their first analyst that was going to actually sit in a room with a bunch of screens and just look at energy data all day. So these are the kind of, I can kind of go on and on, but these are kind of the informal chats with people that I've had throughout my career. I continue to have throughout my career, and they have altered my career journey in major ways. For example, I met my co-founder for a nonprofit in an accounting class, chatting in the halls about small business. I learned about the first incubator I got into from a shoe entrepreneur at a pop-up market, like super random. I even got to EDF after grabbing coffee with someone and learning that the Climate Corps fellowship program even existed, which I later went on to work on. And on and on. And obviously, I'm calling out the ones that really affected my career path. There were obviously plenty of others that just didn't, and they just ended with a lovely chat, and that was it. But all these chats were never part of my like career plan, right? Like I could never anticipate that I was going to bump into my parents' neighbor, or I was going to go to this pop-up market and talk to this person that was making shoes. It was just these really interesting informal chats that I would have where I would learn answers to questions that I didn't even know to ask along the way. They usually put something on my radar that I didn't know about, and they really started to give me evidence of people that are actually doing this work and going through it and like learning things that I would not be able to learn in a book or watching documentaries or just going obsessively about the issues and the topics that I was interested in. All I'm describing right now is networking, right? I think we typically think of networking as an event-based thing, right? Happy hours, conferences, lots of people wear name tags. But we can't really forget about networking is just making connections with people, whatever that looks like. And I've really experienced firsthand how valuable these conversations are and how grateful I have been that people were willing to say yes and talk to me. So because of that, throughout my 15 years now working in climate, I've received hundreds of requests that are very similar to this one, basically saying, hey, I'm kind of thinking about working in the space. I see you do. I would love to just kind of chat and talk and learn a little bit more about what you do. A lot are online. I've had neighbors, nieces, cousins ask if we could chat. And whenever I can, I always say yes to these requests. And for two reasons. One, those chats were super valuable for me, and I really want to pay it forward. And two, if you spend any time working in the climate space, you know that we are in huge trouble unless we get millions and millions of more people working on this issue. But one day I kind of realized like maybe this isn't enough. Maybe me passively answering these requests isn't enough. And they just kept coming in and more frequently. And I could kind of see a correlation between the urgency of climate change and the amount of requests I was getting. So I started thinking, well, maybe I can be a little bit more proactive and just let people know that I'm even available to talk. So 2 years ago now, I put up a LinkedIn post saying, look, I have an open door policy. If anyone wants to chat with me about working on climate, I'm here. I'm not a career coach. I'm definitely not going to have all the answers to the questions that you have, but I can share my own experience and what I do know, reach out. And I ended it with this hashtag open door climate. And within a day, I had about 400 requests and I had 50 calls scheduled over the next 2 weeks. And I took all those calls, and they were super rewarding. They were really inspiring, but honestly, they were mostly heartbreaking. They were just so disheartening to hear over and over and over people say, I feel stuck. I care so deeply about this, but I can't find anyone to talk to about it, or I just don't know what to do next. And that's when it really clicked for me that this is a huge barrier that we're dealing with for job seekers, is they often do lack a network in the space. And it kind of makes sense if you think about it. If you're typically starting a career or you're going to switch into a new career, likely one of the first things you're going to do is try to talk to someone that's already doing that job, right? If you're interested in teaching, you're probably going to try to talk to a teacher. If you're thinking about being a nurse, you're probably going to talk to someone that's a nurse. And it's a little bit more possible with those because those careers have been around for so long. There's so many people that are doing it. It's probably easier to find through your existing network. The difference with climate careers is it's still pretty nascent. Like it's still all things considered, a young career industry. So it's not as likely that people have those people in their network already that are working in the space, which makes it even harder for them to find those answers to the questions that they have. So here I was talking to as many people as I could. I will say the 50 calls was exhausting, and I don't recommend doing that. But obviously, like me by myself, I'm not going to solve this problem alone. That's ridiculous. I only have so much time. I only represent one experience, one perspective. So I started actually just reaching out to some of my friends, some of my network, and saying, hey, if you'd be open to doing something like this, that would be awesome. I've got a huge list of people that are waiting to chat. So I put up a little website, opendoorclimate.com, and it just had some templated language for climate professionals to say like, hey, I'm doing this open door climate policy, reach out. I put up some other resources for communities like Work on Climate and Terra. And it was pretty crazy. Within a few months, about 100 other climate professionals joined in. And there was a little bit of this feeling of like, whoa, this might be a movement that's kind of starting to grow and take hold. Within a year, about 1,000 climate professionals had signed on to this. And if you were following the hashtag on LinkedIn, it was hard not to log in and see another person that was kind of implementing this policy. And the amazing thing about a movement is it kind of grows in ways that you don't anticipate and takes on different needs in some cases. So from that, Terra.do has created their own open door climate platform within their ecosystem that is a little bit more of like the sophisticated directory that people can actually connect with and talk to each other. People are hosting recurring open door climate workshops based on expertise areas. So they'll have kind of like rotating people coming in to talk. And then others have even kind of taken the larger concept and applied it in different spaces. So I've seen open door research, I've seen open door innovation, and a couple others. And that's super exciting to be able to see, because this larger theme of open, accessible networking is a need everywhere. But I think climate is just what I know, and that's where it started. So now, 2 years later, since that post I put up, there's almost 2,000 climate professionals that have added their name to the Open Door Climate Directory, which is a searchable, filterable directory that climate job seekers can browse. They can find professionals that are already saying, yes, I'm willing to talk, please reach out. You can search based on interest areas, on topics you're looking at, geographies. There's even if they've transitioned from another industry, because that's also a big challenge, is finding people that have made the switch, or if they're just really new to the space and less than a year in, and like, how did you break in? So I estimate that about 30,000 conversations have happened through this open door climate movement. And now it's just amazing to see some of those job seekers that had some kind of chat get a climate job and then turn around and implement their own open door climate policy as a way to pay it forward. And that's my hope in all of this. Obviously, I don't think a hashtag movement is going to solve a challenge as huge as climate career networking. That's ridiculous. But I hope that people take on more of the mindset about being available just for a 10-minute chat with someone that's interested in using their job or pursuing a career working on the biggest threat facing humanity, which seems like a pretty good use of time, because we are going to need a ton more people, and there's just no automating or scaling the value of just one-on-one conversations with people that know the space and have been through it. So in terms of actionable things that everyone can do, if you are a climate professional, I invite you to join the Open Door Climate movement. Whether you use that hashtag or not, I don't care. I just want people to kind of join in and say, hey, I'm open, and just try to even find an hour a month to chat. That's usually 4 people you could talk to. And on those calls, just share what you know. This isn't an expert interview. It's not about, do you know the feasibility of this technology? It's just about, what's your story? What have you gone through? And sharing what you do know. If you are a job seeker, then, or you're thinking about switching into the space, there are people that are here to talk to you. And that's my biggest message today, is like, you're not alone in this. There are people that you can network with instantly. And I encourage you to go browse that directory at opendoorclimate.com or search that hashtag on LinkedIn and reach out to people that have volunteered their time. Couple tips. When you're reaching out, give context. So don't just say, hey, I'm interested in the space, I'd love to talk. Say what specifically you might be interested in. If you do know, give context on why you're reaching out to them specifically, right? Like, I see you work in this region and you're working on this topic. I'm really interested in both those things. I'd love to talk. That will go a long way to people being able to say, like, yes, I can make time and I know what we're going to talk about. The time one's also big. Please be respectful of the time that people are carving out. I know it's a volunteer thing and these are casual chats, but it's still people scheduling this in their time. So if you do need to reschedule or you're not going to make it, just let people know, because that's a big one. And then the last thing is, when the day does come and you do get a job in the space, I just encourage you to pay it forward and just remember how useful it was for you, and to turn around and make time to speak with others. So I'll leave the rest of the time for questions, actually. Just 2 things to look at. That's the website that you can find that directory at. There's also some resources. One of those is, we did something called Day in the Life series, where we talked to a bunch of climate professionals and said, what do you actually do during your day? And what skills do you use? What's the best advice you have for people that are interested in this? And then also, I encourage you just to find me on LinkedIn. I'm always trying to post useful resources for green job seekers. Sometimes I'll do kind of roundups of people doing open door climate policies, so that it's easier to kind of just see. And then when possible, I try to do some kind of behind the scenes stuff of my own job, just to help demystify this work. So I'll stop there. Love to take any questions. And I just also want to say again, thank you for taking your own time to listen in on this and to have interest in working in the space.
Thanks so much, Daniel. What we can do is, since we have some time here, I'll go ahead and invite the 3 people that have put questions in the Q&A up to ask your question directly, and then we'll go from there. So Tori, I apologize for butchering names, Tori Groney. Do you want to ask your question, or I'm happy to ask it?
Oh, sorry, they can't unmute themselves. Let me change that. Or it might be easier
okay.
just to take the question off, actually.
Okay, I'll go ahead and read it. I'll just go ahead and read it. So
Sorry
Tori asks, as we're trying to make the transition into climate, how do we showcase our undergrad or previous work in a better way? I got a master's in sustainable engineering, but I'm often met with confusion with my atypical undergrad degree previous experience, which is stopping my ability to make the transition.
I don't know if it's possible to, Tori, for you to send more information, but I am curious what your past experience is in, because you said that's part of it too. Because what I'll tell you where I'm going with this is, I think it's something a lot of people experience, is if I am transitioning, if I have a degree that doesn't match this, I think it's important to remember that a lot of climate work is not just climate functions, right? A lot of like climate specific companies have the same functions that any other company has. They just happen to be working on climate. So they're going to have accounting, they're going to have business development, they're going to have sales, they're going to have marketing. All these things are still going to be transferable. And then if you put in some kind of, classes or masters or whatever that says like, and also I'm interested in this topic, it goes a long way. So I think don't discredit what industry skills you do have, because that's going to be transferable. The other side is, this is the harder one, but selfishly, I don't want everyone to go work for a climate focused company, meaning a climate dedicated company like a climate tech, right? Selfishly, I want people to stay in companies that are not necessarily climate focused, but find ways to have climate action. That's the most impactful thing that we can do on the whole, is have people that really care about this issue working in non-traditional places. If everyone leaves companies and just goes and joins the climate specific ones, then we're probably not going to do very well, because then it's just left with people that don't care about this issue working in jobs that are having huge impact in terms of levers. So if that is an option, I think that would be a great thing to do too, is like find ways to either bring that into your work, find ways to organize with other staff that's interested in this area, or use your influence and pressure as an employee to talk to your C-suite level and kind of apply some pressure to say, we care about this and we want action on this. I'll stop there.
Thank you. I was just reading comments on that question. Sam B asks, what sector do you think is the easiest to enter on energy/climate for an analyst, especially one focused on regulatory policy or business? Federal government, state, local government, private sector, nonprofit, international.
I don't know the answer to that. I think it's, like I said, I'm not like a career coach, and I don't know the actual entry points in that case, but I get less, I spend less time focusing on what is the largest emissions area that I can be working on, and I spend more time thinking about what work am I going to be able to sustain for the next 40 years. Because I think that's the more important thing, is so I know myself, I'm not an engineering person. I learned that through my own career path. But if someone was like, look, working on hard to abate industry like cement or steel in the green chemistry space is the biggest lever we can pull, knowing that that's not where I really have strength or really enjoy the work, it's not going to matter in 10 years when I'm burned out or just not doing my job well anymore. It's more about what of those things speaks to you most personally. So if you care about more of like the policy side from a government lens and really get inspired by that work, that's where you're going to have the biggest impact, versus going against something that kind of doesn't speak to you as much. That's what I'll say, just in terms of regardless of the topic, regardless of the entry point.
Thank you. Karishma D asks, and this is a very popular question, if every issue is a climate issue, why are most organizations, especially within nonprofits, so fixed on demanding prior experience in climate, even with transferable skill jobs like strategic communications and campaigns?
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm not going to defend that one bit. I'm totally with you. I also think there's a huge issue of demanding experience that is not even possible, right? Like I've seen postings where it's like 15 plus years of direct air capture strategy. Like, has it been around that long? Like, how could that even be possible? There's a lot of that. And I think it's because companies treat it like a wish list. That's how they treat their job descriptions is, man, could you imagine if there's someone out there like this? Let's put it out, and maybe someone's out there that we don't even know about. that needs to change. Companies need to stop doing that because it does really shut off a lot of their applicants. The other thing that I really am a strong advocate for is less of let's bring in all the experience and more on let's upskill existing staff, because that's what needs to happen too. Is let's get away from a CSO that is going to come in and have all the things and do all the stuff, and can we break that into two more junior roles that can then divide and conquer some of that work and upskill and really learn some of the other things. So I wish I had like more insight in that other than like I agree. I agree that's a problem.
Thank you. Abhijit asks, what's the future of carbon accounting? Wouldn't data be done better by AI?
Yeah, that's not, I wish I had more thought on that. That's definitely not my area of expertise. So I'm sure there's someone else here that might be able to speak more to that. Um, the only thing I'll say about carbon accounting is we're going to need a lot more accountants because of the SEC disclosure rulings coming out, and the shift from reporting is going to become way more mandatory than it has been in the past.
Hannah N asks, and there's a couple other comments on this as well, so I'll just combine the question. Since there are so many professionals on the directory, do you have any tips on how to narrow down the best resources to reach out to? Similar question, will there be future ways to topically, categorically filter the directory, or do we just need to just experiment with keyword searching? And the years working on climate field is standardized and easy to filter, but the geography, region, and topics are wide ranging and really vary.
Yeah. Yeah. The cracks are really showing. So this is, I should preface all this by this is not my job, right? Like this is a passion project that I do on kind of nights and weekends when I can. I also have a 7-month-old baby, so like that time's even more limited. But this is really kind of just been put together as it's gone on. So it started with like 100 people, and that was much more manageable. But it's since kind of blown up, and so I wish I had standardized those things in the past. Um, Two things I'll say. One, definitely look at it on a desktop because it's an Airtable and you can search keywords and do all the filtering on desktop. You can't do that on mobile. Um, and then the other thing is, yeah, it's a little bit of kind of playing with it. My goal is in the future to maybe work with someone or have someone help me out in terms of like making it a little bit easier to navigate. But what you didn't see is it used to be like a tricycle. It used to be a Google sheet and it was like chaos. And now it's like a nicer road bike because it's searchable. That was a win. So yeah, I wish it was easier. I'm hoping to get it there. It's just like a time, and it's not an organization, right? So like there is no budget, there is no anything. It's just trying to do this a little bit here and there to help some people.
Scott S. asks, where are you seeing hardware tech opportunities in the nature-based solution space? I'm a mechanical engineer with backgrounds in robotics and reliability.
Again, I wish I knew that space better. I don't. I think there was a mechanical engineering session this week actually. That would, if you haven't checked that out, I would check that session out. I'm sure they talked all about that. There's the recordings obviously. And then also my go-to source, just so you all know, for anything climate tech related is called Sightline Climate. They used to be called CTVC. But they basically just have they have amazing insights in anything going on in climate tech. So that usually is a lot of hardware solutions. And you can really kind of dive deeper into like, where's the funding going, which then means where are the startups coming from and like where are the opportunities there. Yeah, thanks, Nikki, for putting that in there. But yep, that's I for anything that's sector or topic related, I encourage you to kind of check out if there was a session on it this week, because I'm sure they did a much better job.
Lisa asked, wondering, as someone entrenched in the climate industry, where you think the best platform is for finding contract or freelance jobs in the climate space, as
Mhm.
opposed to full-time jobs seen on LinkedIn. And
Yeah.
Alex was kind enough to throw in some resources there, but we'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Awesome. Thanks, Alex, for adding in on that. Uh, in my own experience, I found the most success for finding that kind of work through communities. So more of like finding who I might work with than like the actual project host. So, I'm thinking like Upwork and stuff like those kind of platforms. I don't know if there's a climate specific one. Maybe Alex put some of those in there. But what I would encourage you also to think about is if you are seeing full-time opportunities if you are seeing like large contracts, it still could be good to reach out to those people just to be like, hey, I saw this. I actually could help out with this piece if you decide that you want to go more of a consulting route or something else. Again, I think the thought that these like full-time job descriptions are like set in stone and they're so fixed is not always the case. Um, so that does a couple things. One, that tells you like there clearly is a need for them to have help on that. And two, it's already giving you a little bit of a proposal head start because they're probably describing the project and the work that's going to be worked on. So that's just more of like a kind of scrappy way to do it versus dedicated platforms. But hopefully Alex saw that or Alex put some up. But yeah, also look at communities, work on climate, look at Terra. There's probably other people out there that are currently doing work or looking for help.
Thanks. And this leads into the next question from Nev. Do you have any advice about connecting with climate professionals and building a community locally and in person? And Holly, again, was kind enough to pop in some information, but would love to hear from you on it.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of my whole goal with Open Door Climate is how do we make those connections? I think on the local level, um, I'm just a big fan of like using LinkedIn in lots of ways, but LinkedIn could be a great place to say like, yeah, show me more of geography level of people working on this space or trying to find work in this space. Uh, I think that's usually good. If you're in like a major city, there's no lack of like happy hour, like green drink happy hours and stuff like that. Um, Again, I would recommend going to those communities first. So like look at work on climate, look at their own hubs in there. Net Impact has professional chapters that might be a good place, more of social issue, not just looking at sustainability. Uh, and then just kind of it's like making new friends, right? Like it's kind of awkward to to be like, hey, do you want to hang out again? But I think it's a lot of that, right? Like it's easy to go those kind of events and then be like, okay, I went and that's it. Um, I think it just takes effort to continue to reach out and continue to make plans with people to kind of have that ongoing local chapter feel.
Thank you. I think a lot of people can resonate with this next question. The title of it is Should I Give Up? I know
Yeah.
everyone says climate work needs tons of people, but I feel like I've been locked out of the industry for the past 5 years. I've been applying everywhere, reaching out to people, going to events, upskilling, etc. It hasn't made much of a difference. No idea why. I apply, get interviews. It's always your qualifications are impressive, but we're moving
Yeah.
ahead with other candidates. So I'm utterly without a clue. Need some advice. And
Yeah.
yeah.
No, I'm first off, I'm just sorry to hear that. It sucks. I often remind people that climate's not special, right? It's still getting a job, which is super hard. Um, it doesn't matter what industry you're working in, like especially if it's a new industry that you're trying to break into, it doesn't matter how good it is for humanity or the planet, it's very challenging to stand out. I know there was also some sessions this week on like how do you stand out and some of those kind of tips. Um, I would hope you don't give up. That's my selfish answer. The realistic answer is maybe it's time to take a break. Um, if you feel like you're getting burned out just from this process, maybe it's time to take a step back and like give yourself a couple months off from the grind of searching and trying to find it. And just kind of recenter a little bit, because that's probably starting to show up when you are networking and when you are applying. Is like, if you have that fatigue, it's going to probably start showing up in interviews. It's probably going to start showing up in cover letters, things like that. Um, it's tough. The other thing I would say is maybe just like shake up your approach a little bit. Um, I don't remember what the breakdown is, probably 80-20, but I really like this theory of like, I hear people to be like, I've applied to 150 jobs in the past month and I haven't heard back from any. And my first reaction is, that's too many jobs you're applying to in that short of a time. Like there's an 80-20 rule of like 20% of your time should be spent actually applying. 80% should be trying to network to get within that company in terms of finding contacts or talking to people. If you're just blindly sending off applications, that's really, really hard. That's just not how hiring happens these days. So if you're not doing that, I would recommend kind of shaking up that approach a little bit. But I think it's a combination of just patience and like taking care of yourself, like making sure that you're not getting burned out just from the process, taking a break if you need to. Finding community is a huge one in terms of like finding people that are going through the same process with you, because they are the only ones that probably get it, and you can actually like find a lot of empathy and connection in that. So
Can you give those
yeah,
percentages one more time? I just want to kind of drive that point
just
home. I
80,
think it's
80,
really
20
important.
is
Yeah.
80-20 is kind of what I hear, which is a very standard, like, breakdown.
Thank you. How do you think about spending money when transitioning your career, for example, to climate, different role? Things like Terra.do and some of the fancy panels and conferences are pretty expensive, and other things I see priced at the level are scammy. I'm not convinced that they're worth it versus things like Climate Career Week, MCJ, Never Search Alone, Getting Coffee, and someone in your network, which are much cheaper and have been pretty high value.
Uh, it's so personal. I don't think there's like a blanket answer for everyone. Everyone has very different situations of how much disposable income they have in their hands and what they personally need in terms of like, okay, I get the question a lot of, should I go back to school? And that's such a personal question, both on the finances, but also if you're having trouble and you're like, oh, I don't know if I can afford that, you need to approach it as an investment. So there needs to be some kind of like, okay, I know that I want this job. That job requires this degree. I need that degree, and I'll get that investment back. Whenever possible, if you can do that, that's great. Um, I don't know how to say this without it coming across too cynical, but I don't like conferences. That's just a blanket statement. I personally don't find value in going to them, because I feel like it is so marketing heavy and it's so talking points on panels that it's not for me. Um, and I'm also a huge introvert. So like the idea of walking into a networking room just full of hundreds of people, I'm like, nah, I'm good. I'm going to my hotel room and I'm going to frown for a while and just like recharge. Um, so that's also very personal, right? Like some people find a lot of value in that. I don't, so I'm not going to spend my money on that. I was gonna say one other point. I mean I've gone through very similar. I mean, I started a nonprofit myself, and I remember what it's like to have like nothing in the bank, both organizationally and personally, like nothing in the bank. Um, and just getting very analytical about what I was going to spend money on. So that's when I was trying to go to conferences, because I was trying to kind of pitch this nonprofit and do fundraising. Um, but like if I just went to all of them, I was going to be bankrupt across the board. So just really getting analytical of like, can I talk to someone that's done this and can they tell me the value that they found? Or do I already know that this is a necessary step I have to go through?
Thank you. Lisa asks, do you think that companies post jobs they won't fill to show investors, potential investors, that they're growing?
It's really interesting. A fellow cynic. I don't know. I don't know of that person. Like I've never heard of that from someone that is doing it. I think it's an interesting theory, but yeah, I can't confirm that one way or another.
Okay. Are there resources for job seekers you'd recommend other than chatting with experienced folks to help them develop the personal elevator pitch and
Hmm.
articulate their transferable skills?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of specific resources. I do think the whole elevator pitch and like your own personal narrative is very important. Um, because it is a really good way to be memorable and people like get you a little bit quicker. Um, I'll say for me, like I feel like it took me a good 10 years to figure out what my narrative was because I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. I've never been a career plan person. I've never been like a 5-year plan person. I always joke that my next job probably doesn't exist. So it's really hard for me to think through that. So my own like narrative, I think it just came from having experience and being like, oh, okay, if I look back, I can kind of see these themes. That would be one of my recommendations is look back at what you have done and see if there is any common themes that run throughout it. And that might be your narrative. For me, I started in engineering, and the reality is my work is focused on building programs that empower people to take climate action. That's it. Everything I've done somehow comes back to that. And that's where I think I can have the biggest impact. Um, but yeah, in terms of resources, I mean, I'm sure you all know better ones than I do, so I'm sure there'll be some in the chat here. But I would just say practice it, like write it down, take a walk and say it out loud, like whatever you need to do to like just practice it. I think you learn a ton versus just writing it, because that's how it's going to come out. Is you're going to be telling it to someone. So just try to practice it, try to revise it, and try to make it catchy. I don't know how to say that better, but try to make it catchy.
Thank you. Tim asks, are there resources out there to advise on attempting to change a non-climate tech organization from within? I'm debating
Hmm.
between a pivot to climate tech or to try to move the needle without switching jobs, but I'm not clear on how I would even go about doing the latter.
Yeah, that's awesome. I hope you stay again for selfish reasons, but yeah, I don't know if Drew Wilkinson did a panel this week or not, but Drew Wilkinson is like just an awesome resource for someone that has shown how you can actually use your influence as an employee to drive big action. So he was at Microsoft. He co-founded their employee sustainability group, grew it to 10,000 staff, and they got some shit done. Like they really did some things, which is unbelievable. Um, he has a bunch of workshops. He has a bunch of, yeah, someone just put his URL in there. Um, but he does a lot of work in terms of like really spelling out like how do you do this. That's that's the my biggest advice in itself though is like you need to find people to go along with you. If you're just going to go and say I alone am going to shift this company to be climate focused or care about sustainability, it's going to be such a hard business case to make. um, the other quick things I'll say, so definitely collaboration, finding allies, definitely finding alignment that might not look like climate. So like if you can find the business case for it, right? Will it attract new customers? Will it retain and attract new employees? Will it mitigate future risk? Whatever that is, ensuring that that's a big part of your case instead of just showing like there is no Planet B posters around the office. Um, and then the third is just really kind of around um, alignment with strategy. So maybe there's a way to kind of latch that on to something else going on. And timing. Timing's obviously a big one. You never know.
Thank you for that. Jason and quite a few others asked, once you meet someone on a forum like this, how do you recommend building, cultivating that relationship over time? After the initial phone call is a monthly email to check in, a recurring meeting, just remaining connected on social media and reconnect if when something interesting pops up.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So what I've talked about so far is like one-off chats, right? Like a lot of those conversations that I said that I had in the beginning, those are one and done things where like we just had a talk, something kind of clicked for me that they said, and like that gave me a little bit of direction, or in some cases there was like some kind of introduction. What you'll notice though is those were not, I think we get really stuck on like networking is only talking to people at companies we want to work at. I guess what I'm trying to say is like definitely broaden that to like you can learn a ton from other people that might actually change some of your thinking because it's just not on your radar. What you're talking about is shifting that a little bit more to like almost a mentorship or like a longer term relationship. And really that has to be two ways. It has to be a two-sided thing. So for you, it is important to be very respectful of that and kind of ask like, would you be willing to talk to me again in a month or catch up in another week, to really see if they have the bandwidth to do that, and if so, being really intentional about the time that you're spending together. I think that's usually a fear for people is, man, I can't sign on to be a mentor to someone because it's just such a time commitment and I want to make sure that I'm showing up for them. So doing things like putting together an agenda for something you want to talk about, using only the time that you need. I think sometimes we're like, we'll do an hour call, but after 15 minutes, it's just kind of like dragging. So being really respectful and being very upfront and transparent about like, I would be interested in continuing to talk and kind of having that conversation in the moment versus just like sending a calendar invite a month later, being like, hi, would love to catch up. Yeah, I'll kind of stop with that though.
Thank you. Do you recommend reaching out to hiring managers or potential supervisors on LinkedIn after applying to express interest? If so, do you think there's a right time to reach out?
Yeah, I do. I think, I was just talking to someone recently where they were on the hiring manager side. This was like a small startup, so this wasn't like a larger company, but and I was asking like they had an interview, they interviewed someone, they're like, it went pretty well. They didn't send a thank you. And they said it in such a way where it was like, no, like that, so I can't move forward with that person. Um, that's to say, I do think following up can be a good thing. Um, Again, it's just like be respectful of it, right? Like don't guess their email if they don't give you their email. That's not a good look. This person had the email. That's why this was a thing because they were emailing first. Um, if you want to send a connection request to the person afterwards, that's fine. But also don't be offended if they don't accept it, right? Like that's a real thing too. They might not feel comfortable doing that because they don't want to like make it seem like it's tipping a hat. Um, so I think it's fine to do. I don't think it's a necessary thing to do on LinkedIn, but be respectful. Don't cross any kind of like privacy stuff, and also don't take it personal if it's not reciprocated right away.
Thank you. It seems like a lot of presenters from this week wanted to work in climate, but were dissatisfied with the opportunities they found and then created their own company as a result. It takes a lot of work and is not always possible given the different situations people are in, and is somewhat against the turn your job into a climate job mantra that has been repeated many times this week. It's also against the data showing that the established large companies will still have the biggest effect on climate in the next decade or so. What is needed to shift the actions of the big players who affect the climate and environment the most? And what can we do to help influence that shift if we don't work for them?
Great question. And I agree. I was one of those people, right? Like I used to work in sustainability consulting. I would work with real estate developers to try to make their buildings as energy efficient as possible. I'll share my own experience and say that I started to go to work and felt like I was just making this person money that owned the company, and I did not feel like I was having an impact on the environment. And that's why I was like, I can't do this. I want to go work in the nonprofit space where I think there's more alignment to the purpose-driven reasons that I want to do this work. And I just happened to be working on a side idea at the time. And that's when like I was like, this seems to be the right time to try to grow my own nonprofit, which was called Green Impact Campaign. We would train students to do energy audits for small businesses. So it was trying to give that experience to students while also helping this underserved market for energy efficiency. I think there's a lot that has to happen at those larger levels. And if I'm being completely honest, I'm extremely disheartened by how long it's taking and how slow it's taking. And I think it's because we're getting so, this is a little more philosophical, but we're so focused on the argument and not the fight. So we're so focused on like, no, climate change is real, it's man-made. We're so focused on like convincing people that don't believe or are actively going against that this is a thing that exists. That argument's done. Like the science is spoken for that. There's an intentionality now when people are like no, well, the science says this. That doesn't matter because it's all about like this power and influence side. And that's what I mean by the fight. And it's harder to win that because you're threatening power and influence, right? So like a lot of the companies that have made the money the way they've made it probably don't want to change, but they're going to say what they need to kind of keep people off their back. In order for that to change, we need pressure. That's my biggest answer is we need the fight to come to those companies in such a large mass that they then feel these are very aggressive terms. They feel threatened of their business because there is so much pressure on it. So I think I know that's a really big thing to say for someone that's just looking to work in the space, but it's just to say that it's not it's not because we're going to create a new program and that's going to change this. It's so high the level that needs to be changed and the levers that need to be pulled, and it's so much about power and influence that's what needs to change for companies to be like, okay, we're going to really try to incorporate this into our business. We're not just going to have this little thing on the side that we say and talk more about than we actually do. Yeah, I'm sorry. I feel like I'm just full cynic at this point in the talk, but I think there's a frustration that comes along with working in this space for so long, seeing it getting worse and wanting so desperately to like have the things happen that could fix it.
Thank you. Any further advice on how to maintain connections in a way that doesn't seem wholly artificial or forced?
Yeah, I on a happier note, I can say when I've talked to people and then they follow up, it's always nice to hear things that have resonated or things that are relative to the conversation, right? So like if I was like, hey, based on what you're saying, it sounds like you might be interested in like checking out this organization. And they're like, okay, I'll check it out. And then to come back, a week later and then say like, I checked it out, looks awesome. I'm super interested in this area. Do you know anyone that works in that? Or like, what are your thoughts on that? Are you familiar with it? People like when they kind of get that closure in a way, instead of just like, here's some thoughts and like, you're not sure if it was helpful or not. So hearing that really kind of like is inspiring and like feels rewarding for the person. So I would recommend that. I would make sure that you're not just only reaching out with new requests, right? Like that are unrelated, or like now they're reaching out about a different company and a different person. And like, okay, now it just feels very transactional. And that's not what I'm here for. I'm not going to just use social capital for this person that like, I'm not sure if they're even serious about this. I'm not sure if they're looking into these things at all. You want to feel like it's a conversation and that there's dialogue going. So that's my biggest advice is try to make it more of an ongoing conversation instead of ongoing requests.
Thank you. Open Door Climate clearly addressed a need Is there another gap that you've seen in the space that could be addressed with a similar method? Someone organizing, facilitating the details the way that Open Door Climate does.
That's a cool thought. I always talk about, I've talked to so many job seekers at this point. I've one is lack of network. That's the biggest one. Two has been the feel like they don't have the direct experience that's being listed. Three is they don't know if their skills are transferable. And four is they just don't know what to look for, right? Like, okay, great. There's all these green job boards out there. Like, I don't know what companies to search for based on what I'm interested in. I don't know what roles I should be interested or be searching for. Um, I I think the biggest gap, and I'm so happy to see more of these coming up, is more of like this like boot camp style of people that feel like they lack the skills and the experience can kind of participate in these things where like, okay, we're going to teach you those skills and then apply them in a real world project that you can then talk about in your interviews. OPF Academy is one of those that I'm a big fan of. That I think is a huge need. I also think that's something we saw in the tech industry. Climate and tech, there's a lot of parallels people like to talk about because they're both like these nascent, upcoming, well, tech was, it's obviously much more mature now, but you saw that in tech. There was like this huge surge of boot camps where it's like, learn how to code, learn how to do this, that kind of upskilled people and place them sometimes. I think we're going to start seeing more and more of that in the climate space. And I'm really happy that we're already seeing some. So I think that's a big need, but also one that's really cool to see starting to kind of get filled.
Thank you. This has to do with transitioning from the private sector to public policy. Thoughts on how someone who has only been in the private sector can get involved in influencing policy in the public sector. I'm a big advocate for carbon fee and dividend legislation, but don't have any experience beyond volunteering in policy government. Mostly I've been sales and recruiting.
Yeah, you're a skills expert. I mean, that's what I think you have to really lean on is like I know the inside of this industry. Well, I'm just assuming that you would be on the policy side of something you've been involved with. That's the easiest one I think is like, um, okay, so Environmental Defense Fund, right? We have corporate partnerships program that's really focused on methane. We love hiring people that are formerly from the oil and gas industry because they know a lot about what goes on the inside. They know what they care about, how to talk to them. There's lots of things that they know that there's no way we could know just being a nonprofit on the outside. Same concept with policy. If you know the inner workings of something, that's incredibly valuable for people that are trying to develop policy to enact action at those levels. So I think that's kind of part of the pitching. If it's a completely different sector or industry, I think you kind of got to figure out where your entry point is, right? Like what makes the most sense for you to start in a place and then maybe slowly migrate to that, because it just might not be as transferable.
And we have time for just one more question. As someone who's connected and many climate professionals is dialed into the space, do you see any trends in terms of hiring? Can you speak to how the landscape might change in the next 1 to 3 years?
I think LinkedIn just released like their latest green jobs report. I haven't looked at it enough, but real quick, I'll just say, ESG, we saw this ESG surge, right? A couple years ago, there was just like everyone, especially banks, were just hiring like crazy fast, like ESG analyst. And a lot of that was just reporting. That was the biggest boom I saw was everyone wants to be able to do reporting and everyone's looking for people that can do it. Unfortunately, like there's this very like anti-ESG rhetoric going on right now. So you're starting to see a little bit of that close up with some of the companies being so public about that. So I don't think it's because it's going away. I think it's just that people are not as public about like, hey, we're an ESG company because it's so polarizing now, which is so stupid. but I think that's going to continue. I think in terms of corporate sustainability, so much of the work is just reporting and disclosure. It's like very not glamorous to say that, but that's the reality. Is corporates are just trying to figure out, how do I report and disclose what we're doing. And then the more proactive ones are saying, cool, and then can we take that data and act on it? And that's where it's, not always the case, but we want it to be. Yeah, so I'll say just reporting and disclosure continues to be a huge one.
We're at the top of the hour. Thank you so much, Daniel, for sharing all of your insights and answering our questions. And we appreciate all that you've done in this industry and helping move it forward. Thank you all for those that have attended. We'll look forward to seeing you in other events and hope you all have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Really
you.
appreciate it.